Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. In today's video we're going to be talking about the case of Ted Bundy, who was an American serial killer and rapist. So let's just go ahead and get into this case. In 1969, Ted met the love of his life at a bar in Seattle. He was such a gentleman, charismatic, drove her home, even found out she had a daughter because he met the sitter outside her home as he was dropping her off. He even had the detail of making her feel comfortable about her being a mom, how it was okay, and show her that he didn't even want to have sex. He just wanted to cuddle her because he knew he was tired from being in the bar. He was so intrigued by her, he made her breakfast, and that's basically how they started their relationship, in which she described him as being a sweet and a gentleman who was very kind to her and her daughter, and they had such enormous relationship at the beginning. So in 1974, there were many girls and women who were being attacked and murdered. Girls were disappearing from the streets, the parks, everywhere, and so that's when the Kings County Police Department started their investigation. A year later in Utah, Ted Bundy was actually pulled over because he was speeding up and ran two stoplights. He started telling Liz, which was still his girlfriend at the time, that it was all a mistake, that they had the wrong guy. He was not aware of what was happening. He felt as if he was being followed by the police, and on top of it, he claims that somebody was actually following his every move. A year after, Ted was actually in trial for a witness who got to escape. But it was very weird because she said that basically it was the police who told her what she was supposed to say. So, in other words, she couldn't identify Ted or his car. In the meantime, Ted was trying to live a normal life, or pretend to. He was so into law, living with his girlfriend, basically helping her raise her daughter. They even were thinking of getting a dog. But of course, Ted was found guilty despite the evidence for kidnapping, and so he goes to prison. While he was in prison, he kept in constant communication with Liz. He told her he wanted her to come see him, and that he actually thought the case was going to be overturned, and that he was already working on his appeal. Liz was getting phone calls from Colorado PD asking her questions about Ted. Homicide detectives at that point were looking for similarities in their open cases, and that is when his attorney tells him not to speak to anyone while in prison. But Ted actually tried to be a smart ass and tell a detective that he's basically never been to Colorado, knowing that he has been there multiple times and even took his girlfriend Liz a time or two. And basically his attorney just goes and tells him, I told you he wasn't supposed to talk to anybody. Either way, I have to give up on you because I'm not even licensed in Colorado. So when Ted was moved to Colorado, it was very stressful for his family and Liz. And that's when she kind of started to lose hope in their relationship and Ted. And at some point, she was drinking almost every day. In the meantime, Ted got some benefits. He was actually able to use the phone unlimited times. He was able to have his own desk. Ted was found guilty in Colorado, and they were even considering the death penalty at that point. In that moment, his relationship started to fail even more. Liz didn't want to take any more flights to come to trial. She wasn't even picking up her phone. I mean, think of it. He was standing trial for the murder in Colorado, convicted in Utah for kidnapping, and he still had hopes and kept his story about how he was not guilty. Who in her shoes will still fully trust him? So after the trial, he said that he basically had to use the bathroom or call Liz. And because he already knew the office and the land, he managed to escape. He was actually captured again after 6 days of freedom. So when he goes back to prison, he actually finds a surprise that Liz actually went to visit him not for the right reasons. Basically, she told him that she couldn't handle it anymore and it was becoming a lot. At that point, Ted was already FBI 10 most wanted list. He had managed to escape again. Liz started to become closer to one of her co-workers who was a very genuine guy who started to care for her. And they basically started a friendship, but not fully because, of course, she was still in love with Ted. So in the time where he escapes again, he striked again, killed many more people this time, including people from sorority. He was pulled over once again. He proceeds to punch the officers and try to run and get away again, but he gets in custody, claiming that it was because he made a deal with the police. So once Ted was in Florida, authorities were really there to play no games with him. They conducted his indictment with press for the first time, in which he was charged with 2 counts of murder in the first degree and 3 attempted murders. Ted actually got a visit from a friend who was willing to move to Florida just to be closer to him, saying that it would be good for him if he maybe had a familiar face around. Her name was Caroline, and since her first visit, she became very involved in this case and in the decisions that were being taken about Ted. But let's be honest, Ted was a very smart man who, even after all the charges, he never changed his story. Even after lawyers advised him to please plead guilty so he wouldn't get the death penalty, he insisted that he was not guilty and stuck to his story the whole time. At that time, Ted already had a gag order and was highly convinced that even his own lawyers were against him. So Caroline decided she wants his side of the story to be heard and tells him that she's not afraid to make it happen for him. Ted's case became very, very popular, and a lot of young women were completely obsessed with him, saying that they loved him, that he's hot, that he doesn't really seem like the type to kill someone, and social media was all over this case as well. During trial, Ted Bundy confessed that he was actually advised by his own lawyer to plead guilty so he doesn't get a death penalty, and says that he basically was going to defend himself from that point on. The whole time Ted was on trial, he was literally calling Liz every day and night, leaving messages saying that he loves her. He even got to speak with her friend at the time and ask him to please remind her that he loves her. But it was around the time when he started having sex with Caroline, and later on she realized that maybe he did not love her like he said he did. And she started acting out, and that's when he suggested that she was all that mattered at the time, that he had been left alone by Liz, and that he wanted it all with her. And so he brings up Caroline to the stand and asks her to marry him. After knowing that Ted asked Caroline to marry him, Liz felt very, very guilty, and she felt like it was all her fault and he could possibly die because of her. Because she was actually the person that gave his name to the police. Before the verdict, Caroline tells Ted that he's actually pregnant. And soon after that, he is found guilty of all murders in first degree and all attempted murders as well. So after that, it was just to decide whether he was going to receive the death penalty or not. But the judge decides that because of the extent of his crime, he indeed deserved the death penalty. Before he's executed, he sends Liz another letter saying that that was going to be the last letter to her, and if anyone deserves to know the truth, it was her. And so she goes to visit him. And of course, she demands to hear the truth from him because they started a relationship with lies. And she confessed that she was actually the person that called the police and gave her his name. And of course, he says no to every question, saying that he didn't kill anyone, denying everything. So after she basically begged him and told him she's been suffocating for so many years, he finally tells her that he wouldn't have done any of that or even thought of doing any of that to her, and gives details about a body that was found without a head. She lives hysterically crying, knowing that the man that she loved for so many years, the man that lived with her, the man that was around her daughter day and night, was actually a serial killer and a rapist. So Ted was actually executed in January 24th of 1989, but before his execution, he actually confessed of 30 murders, I believe 36 to be exact. But experts believe that the actual number should be a lot higher than that.
I'm not asking for mercy, for I find it somewhat absurd to ask for mercy for something I did not do. So I will be tortured for and will suffer for and receive the pain for that act. But I will not share the burden for the guilt.